Welcome, everyone. I'm just letting everyone enter the webinar. Thanks for your patience. We were just making sure we had everything set up on our end. If you want to share slides, we're ready for that. So my name is Kristen. I'm with Pacific Wild, and while we have everyone entering the Zoom room here, if you want to share where you're from in the chat, that would be amazing. And if you also want to share what your connection is to wolves or why you love wolves, we'd love to hear that. So thank you all for being here today. All right, starting to see where people are calling in from all across Canada, US, Spain.
Switzerland.
Amazing. Wow. Okay, all over the world. So many of you here. It's really exciting. A lot of people who love wolves.
Wow.
That's so great. Well, welcome everyone. I think we'll probably still have people flowing in, but I don't want to lose too much time, so we'll go ahead and get started.
Excuse me.
Yeah, so as I said, my name is Kristen. My name is Kristen Weiss, and I am the Wildlife and Forest Campaigner here at Pacific Wild. I'm hosting this webinar today from Victoria, British Columbia, and we are on the unceded territory of the Lekwungen speaking peoples. I just wanted to tell you a little bit about Pacific Wild for those of you who aren't familiar. So, Tom, if you want to go to the next slide. Yep, oh, you're ahead of me. So, Pacific Wild was founded in 2008, and since then we've been working to protect the extraordinary ecosystems of Canada's Pacific coast. So, that includes the ancient forests of the Great Bear Rainforest and the surrounding areas, as well as the rich ocean waters off of our coast. Many of our current campaigns are advocating for stronger protection for keystone species like herring, salmon, marine mammals, grizzlies, and of course, wolves. So, over the years, we've helped secure some really significant conservation victories in British Columbia, and that includes protecting over 6 million hectares of the Great Bear Rainforest. We've also worked to stop the Northern Gateway Pipeline, helped pass the Federal Oil Tanker Moratorium Act, and achieved an historic ban on grizzly bear trophy hunting, which was pretty amazing. And then recently, we've been working on exposing some of the catastrophic impacts of trawling, in particular, in fisheries. We've also been working to strengthen protections for Pacific herring, wild salmon, and then, of course, this fight to end British Columbia's ongoing wolf cull. So, on that note, we can go to the next slide. We just launched a new public action this week. Some of you might have seen it if you're already on our email list. And we're asking everyone to help us call for an end to the coal in British Columbia once and for all. So I really encourage you all to participate. You can scan the QR code here, or Natasha will put a link to our webpage on in the chat. And you can also just go to our website, pacificwild.org. So basically, for over a decade, the British Columbian government has been shooting wolves from helicopters, calling it caribou conservation. They've shot nearly 3,000 wolves over this decade, and now the government is proposing to extend this cull for another 5 years. We see this as a huge problem because even the government's experts agree that it's habitat destruction that is the principal cause of caribou decline, not wolves. It's mainly coming from the timber industry, from logging, from oil and gas extraction, and the rate of habitat destruction just continues to accelerate. The wolf cull was meant to be this short-term emergency measure that instead has lasted for over 10 years and has basically made wolves the scapegoat for this human-created crisis. So Pacific Wild was invited to submit stakeholder feedback on this proposed 5-year extension, and our deadline for that feedback is June 15th. We think that all of you should be heard as well, so that's why we're collecting your comments and submitting it as part of our feedbacks. So if you go to this QR code or go to our website, you can submit your comments and we will package that up and give that to the government. So we really appreciate you participating. And because All of us are here because we love wolves. We want to protect our ecosystems, and we want that to be based in ethical, compassionate conservation. So, thank you all for doing that. And with that, I will shift over to introducing our amazing panelists. So, today we have with us, of course, Dr. Marc Bekoff and Ian McAllister. So I'll start by introducing Ian and then letting him say a few words about his experience with wolves and with this region, and then I'll introduce Mark and let him speak. So uh, Ian is a co-founder of Pacific Wild and has spent 30 years documenting the biodiversity of the Great Bear Rainforest. He's captured a lot of amazing film and photos of rare and iconic species. You've probably seen images of the spirit bear and also the coastal sea wolves. He's authored or co-authored 15 books, directed films, including a 2019 IMAX on the Great Bear Rainforest, which is screened around the world. He's had images appear on the cover of National Geographic. And he's also an activist. And in fact, he met his wife, Karen, who's our co-founder, our other co-founder of Pacific Wild, when they were both participating in direct actions back in the 90s to try to stop logging in old growth forests on Vancouver Island. So later on, he and Karen were named by Time magazine amongst the environmental leaders of the 21st century for their efforts to protect the Great Bear Rainforest. And to this day, Ian still spends a lot of time in that region, which is where he's calling from today. So, with that, Ian, I'll let you say some words. And I think you wanted us to just play some of the video while you speak, right? So, I'll let Tom move forward with some of those video slides that'll just be in the background, some of the amazing footage that Ian has captured over the years.
Yeah, thank you, Kristen. Can you hear me? Great. Okay. Yeah. Well, thanks so much for putting this together, and for the and to the other staff at Pacific Wild for making this happen. For a discussion on wolves. Also, very excited to be able to share this opportunity with Mark, who has been a tremendous inspiration, source of knowledge for me personally over a long period of time. And so to share the space with you, Mark, means a lot. Thank you for joining us here. It's a heck of an opportunity, but also such a challenge to try to describe the 30 plus years that I've had documenting and researching wolves. Most of my area of expertise comes from Western Canada, mostly along the coast of BC and Vancouver Island. That's where most of my um, uh, work has been done with wolves. Uh, so a lot of the big concern that's happening with wolves is with the wolf cull that's mostly happening in the interior. It's bordering over the Coast Range and is certainly impacting wolf populations along the coast. But I've been really fortunate, I realize, to have immersed myself in the world of wolves. 3 decades ago in a place that probably has the least persecution of wolves, perhaps maybe anywhere in the world. And to be able to really spend time and study and observe wolves that haven't been, forced through these artificial bottlenecks that so many other wolf populations in the world have been forced through long-standing centuries of human persecution has been a very fortunate part of certainly my learning experience with wolves. And when I look at other regions where wolves are, the mortality rates year after year after year, sometimes leading to extirpation and extinction of populations. We don't see that in the coastal rainforest here, which is been a very fortunate part of studying wolves, and that's because we don't have a lot of there's not an agrarian culture. There's not a lot of livestock. There's not a lot of competition. Indigenous people have cultural respect for wolves, and they've been able to hide in the rainforest during the havoc of colonization throughout, North America. So this is a really special population of wolves, and I feel like I've learned so much from them over the years. And when I go back to the first years, our focus was on trying to develop a conservation plan for the Great Bear rainforest, and a lot of our focus was on grizzly bears and salmon, and of course, we'd come across wolf tracks everywhere, and we'd hear them howling in the rainforests at night. But the idea that you could actually observe them in the wild because they were so seldom seen seemed almost impossible. But as the years went on, and I realized that uh, it was really about timing and being in the right place at the right time, and recognizing that these wolves aren't randomly wandering through the landscape indiscriminately looking for opportunities to hunt, but we're revisiting places where they had had success over many many generations, and that because of the lack of persecution, these wolf families, these packs, these extended families were living very, very much in the landscape that they had for a very, very long time. And I soon learned that if I would just stay in one place where I had seen wolves in previous seasons and previous years, and returned at the same time, that suddenly, with that strategy in mind, I began finding the opportunity to observe wolves in this rainforest environment on a much more predictable basis. And it really taught me so much that, again, that these animals aren't indiscriminate. They're not just randomly wandering opportunistically, but have very established paths and very established hunting techniques and very established prey. And you find with such a diverse environment like this, especially along the ocean, some packs were really specializing very differently in prey items than others, and some specializing in sea otters during winter months when they're hauled out on the rocks, and some very much specializing in wild salmon in the fall season, and predictably showing up on the shorelines to feed on herring eggs in the early spring. And so much of their prey base was actually coming from the marine and ocean environment. So there's been so much learning about these animals, but I think most importantly is learning about how truly structured they are. Of course, we know how social, how intelligent, um, but also how disciplined. And uh, the fact that there was one pack that I spent a lot of time with when I was researching for the book Last Wild Wolves years ago, and so I'd spent a lot of time with this one individual family, and it was quite large. There was about 12 individuals, and one day, one of the adults came back with a shattered rear leg and wasn't able to ever move it again. So basically, hopped around on three legs, and I thought that that wolf would be, doomed. But as they faded after the salmon had stopped running and they faded into the forest for the winter, I was amazed when I caught up with them again the next spring to find that wolf still with the pack. And it it really told me that, of course, the rest of the rest of its family, the rest of the pack had looked after it because it couldn't hunt on its own. So there's just been so many examples like that, so many experiences that show, what is truly capable in a wild wolf population that hasn't suffered the kind of persecution that we have wreaked upon so many other wolf populations around the world. And unfortunately, not just around the world, but what's happening really throughout Western Canada. Wolves have always suffered from the worst marketing in the world. They've been persecuted from religion, from mythology, from so many other things that Europeans carried with them to North America. Perhaps next to sharks, they really have the worst public relations teams working for them when you consider so many different varied opinions about wolves. And I think that one of the things that so there's been this long history of hunting wolves and and so-called managing wolves in British Columbia, but nothing really prepared us for what we suddenly were aware of in 2015. And just taking a step back, what really should have happened is about 25 years ago, the federal government should have come into British Columbia, realized the BC government was incapable of managing woodland caribou. Woodland caribou were blinking out. They were going, populations were going extinct in this northern progression. They didn't do anything when the Species at Risk Act, are equivalent to the United States endangered species legislation. They didn't do anything for about another decade. And when it became so dire for these woodland caribou in the interior, the provincial government, with the support of the federal government, instead of dealing with the oil and gas industries, and instead of dealing with the timber companies, instead of dealing with the mining issues and the total habitat destruction of woodland caribou, they suddenly announced in 2015 they were going to spend millions of dollars on a massive wolf cull that was to last for 5 years. This was without public support or public input. This was just announced as a stopgap measure to keep the federal government away from the province, so that they didn't enact any of the species at risk legislation, which should have been triggered for protecting habitat. So suddenly wolves were being blamed for everything, in particular for the extirpation of caribou. And it was an assault on wolves like nothing we have ever really seen before, probably not since the bison were eradicated from the prairies. Since and over the last decade, over 10,000 wolves have now been killed. Many of those from the government-sponsored killing of Judas wolves, where they radio collar a wolf and follow it in the deep snow, kill the pack, allow the radio colored wolf to continue, and they repeat year after year. So, well over 10,000 wolves, well over $10 million has now been spent specifically to eradicate wolves from large parts of British Columbia. And, to put that in perspective, the provincial government estimate for all the wolves in British Columbia is somewhere around 8,000 wolves. So we've actually killed in one decade far more than the entire population of wolves in the province. And they still haven't updated that population for over 30 years. So it's been just really heartbreaking to witness this complete intransigent governments. They refuse to look at the health and welfare and quality of life in this barbaric and cruel wolf cull that continues every year. They refuse to protect adequate habitat for caribou, and their only solution is to continue killing wolves. So wolves are paying the ultimate price in government negligence and for not being taking action to protect critical habitat. And that's the situation that we find ourselves in now in British Columbia. And until really enough people make their voice heard and voice opposition to this barbaric wolf cull, the current government is saying that they are going to continue doing this indefinitely. So we definitely need to ramp up our voices and speak a lot louder for wolves because they have enough things that they have to face without vast amounts of taxpayer dollars going into helicopter snipers and all the rest of it. And I know Mark has so much to say about what this does to these extended families when you're constantly fragmenting them and killing individuals and then expecting them to behave like normal animals after such horrific killing. So I want to pass it over to Mark, and um, thanks for listening. Yeah, or I guess I'm
Thanks,
going to
Ian.
pass it over
Yeah,
to Chris.
I'll just quickly introduce Mark, and then I'll let you take it away, Mark. That was a great segue. And thanks, Ian, for that really important context and history of the wolf call as well. So yes, we're super honored to have Mark with us today. He is a professor emeritus of ecology and evolutionary biology from the University of Colorado in Boulder. He's also a past Guggenheim Fellow. He's a world-renowned biologist, ethologist, and behavioral ecologist. He's done it all. Spent decades studying animal behavior, animal minds, and compassionate conservation. He co-founded the Ethologists for the Ethical Treatment of Animals alongside Jane Goodall, and he's also an ambassador for Jane Goodall's Global Roots and Shoots program and has co-authored a number of books with Jane. He's a prolific writer. I think, Mark, you've written something like 40 books by now throughout your career, and he's also appeared in the New York Times, National Geographic, Psychology Today, and writes a regular column on animal emotions as well. And what else is interesting is, Mark is based in Colorado, and a number of the wolves from British Columbia, so most of them have been shot and killed, but a small subset were actually relocated to Colorado as part of their wolf reintroduction program, which has sustained a number of challenges that Mark has seen in person. So yeah, we really appreciate you being here, and I'll let you take it from here.
Thanks, Kristen. Thanks, Ian. Welcome everybody from all over the world. I'm not a night person. It's about 6:45 here, and it's almost bedtime for me. Um, but I mean, Kristen sent some questions or just some subjects to consider that I think are really important. So I was fortunate enough to be at the Wolf release in December 2023, the first one. And, I want to be really clear. It was in my eyes, regardless of how I feel about these projects, it was really impeccably run. I mean, it really was, you know, um, and everybody there had good intentions. And it's clear that over the years that good intentions are not enough. Okay. And I want to be really clear there because there's people who have worked really hard on this project with whom um, I really disagree on a lot of their views on animal ethics and they're sort of writing off compassionate conservation because it's too um, it's too soft. Somebody said it's too feminine, which I thought was a compliment. Um, but I think one of the major things, and I've been writing about this for a really long time, is that these reintroduction projects are really difficult and complicated. There's many stakeholders. Of course, in my opinion, the wolves would be the primary stakeholders. But then, of course, you've got humans, as you know, in BC, and we know in Colorado, globally, on all sides of the fence. We hear from people who love wolves, who are really okay with killing wolves. And I always say that I'm glad they don't love me. So the word love and the word, that we really want wolves here, that phrase mean different things to different people. So 10 wolves were reintroduced in December 2023. And, you know, it's just not worked out. I mean, I'm not belittling people for having not made hard efforts, regardless of what side of the wolf they're on. But it really hasn't worked out. Um, when you think about what we're doing to these sentient beings, is we're kidnapping them, we're wolf napping them. There's a lot of stress involved. They're caught, they're tranquilized, they're given physical exams, they're flown or driven somewhere, and they're released in a strange area. Packs are broken up. So I think in the first five, there was an older male and two siblings from each of two packs. So a sister and a brother. Okay. So on the ground here, you've got animals who have no idea what's going on. Okay. And in Oregon, where the first group came from, you've got packs that are broken up. You've got mothers and fathers, and they've lost their children. And people go, well, their offspring, they're the young of the year. No, they're children. And in wolves and other animals, many other animals, really complex patterns of parental care have evolved. So people will say, oh, it's just so soft to say that you broke up a family and you took the children elsewhere and they miss their children in Oregon. No, I don't think it's being soft. I think it's being really scientific to make those claims. So the wolves were released. It was wonderful to see them run off. Um, Part of my research for years has been looking at different personalities in dogs and coyotes and wolves because I did a lot of field work on coyotes. I studied penguins in Antarctica also, and they have unique personalities. They don't all look the same. They don't all behave the same. So what struck me immediately at the first introduction was the different personalities of the wolves when they were released from their holding cages after they were kidnapped in Oregon and released here. Okay. And one of my interests would have been to see whether these differences in their personalities would have would influence later behavior. Because decades ago, I did a similar study when I was doing field work in the Grand Teton National Park on coyotes, where there were some correlations. I can't say there were strong correlations or causation or causative relationships between the personality of coyotes when they came out of the den and when we were lucky enough to follow individuals for a number of years, you would see differences in their behavior. I can't think of a nice way to put it, but just demolishing and disintegrating the first wolf pack was anti-science. Science would have told you to leave them alone. So in the big picture, not following science was really a major thing. I really think. CPW at the time said they were following the science, but they weren't following the science. There had been studies done in long-term study done on data from Yellowstone, I think 25 years, countless wolves, showing that when you remove a lead member of a group, the group can dissolve. And of course, that could happen when any of the wolves in a group are removed. That's the polite way of saying, some were killed, some were trapped. So following the science would have helped them a lot. That's my view. And then the big ethical questions is, so look what we did. We took wolves, we brought them here, we let them out into a strange area. And in my eyes, we would have been responsible for the well-being of every individual wolf who we brought here. And that would mean keeping them alive. So I also want to be clear that I understand that ranchers and farmers and others, if you will, on the other side of the wolf equation, also have legit claims. But what happened a lot here early on was that when they wanted something, they got it, and they increased the ante. And the animals who paid the most, of course, were the wolves on the ground. So compassionate conservation would argue that the life of every single individual matters and that we can't just say, well, there's a lot more wolves, so we'll kill a few more, we'll kill a few. And to me, that's what really turned me, if you will, somewhat against the project. I mean, I had mixed feelings about bringing wolves to Colorado from the get-go, unless non-lethal management was on the table. So what's happened here and what's happened elsewhere in other similar projects is we knew some wolves were going to be killed. So compassionate conservation, or at least my view of compassionate conservation, would be that we can't trade off the lives of a member of one species for other members of the same species. And of course, there's projects where we're trading off the life of members of one species for the lives of or well-being of members of other species. So it's really complicated. And I wrote a paper a few years ago called The Slippery Slopes of Reintroduction Projects. So I don't necessarily live in a la-la world, but there are communities around the world where where peaceful coexistence has emerged due to the hard work of the humans, who don't want them, of course, and the hard work of the humans who do want them. And so right now, you probably all know that the program's on hold. One of the men running for governor is in favor of putting the project on hold. And, I don't think you have to be Albert Einstein to see this as a potential move to just end the project. And we don't have the sustainable number of wolves on the ground. Even from today, if no wolves were killed, it would take a long time to build up a sustainable population. Is it doable? Well, I don't know. But I think it's more doable than if wolves are continually being killed. So right now, the program's on hold. We've got wolves out there who are loved by some, I mean, in the true meaning of the word love, and are hated by others. The anti-wolf group is extremely well organized, they're energized, they're highly motivated, and there's not a lot of dissension among them. And I've put this in writing, and so I'm not embarrassed or ashamed to say that the pro-wolf people have to do a better job of working together. They really have to work together, and it would be nice to see some really strong intergroup, if you will, memos or whatever you call them, put out, signed by members of different groups that the killing has to stop. So I'll just stop there. I'm sure there'll be questions, and I'm sure we'll cover some of the same and other other topics. I don't know, Kristen, do you want me to get to the dog thing now?
That's a good point. Well, okay, why don't we can shift the discussion there and maybe you and Ian can both weigh in because yes, you've written and spoken a lot about animal behavior, both of wild animals like wolves and domesticated animals like dogs. And obviously, there's a lot of similarities between those two animals. And I'm also really curious about, you talk about basically understanding that these animals have emotions and personalities is scientific, and you've worked on that science. So I'd love to know a bit more about what does that science say about animal sentience? And then, yeah, how does that play into this, relationship we have with dogs versus how we manage or interact with wolves?
Yeah, well, this will be short, and then I'd love to hear Ian, and I'm sure there'll be questions. Yeah, so, w- dogs came from common wolf ancestor. Dogs are highly emotional beings. So when I was writing a lot early on in the Colorado project, I kept telling people that arguments about sustainability and biodiversity go right over the heads of people, not because they're dumb. It's just they don't care about it. They don't want wolves. It's really as simple as that. So I wrote an article for Psych Today, comparing the emotional lives of dogs and wolves. And that actually got tons of hits and some friendly emails for a change, in the sense of people saying, "Oh, I never thought about that." So the bottom bumper sticker there is, would you do it to a dog? Would you do it to your dog? I'm sure there are people who would harm their dogs, and that's just the way the world rotates. But one thing that I wrote about was, it would have been 10 or 12 years ago. I worked a lot with the Center for Compassionate Conservation at the University of Technology in Sydney. So I went to Australia a lot, and I was going to give a talk one night, and it had some highfalutin title like Compassionate Conservation and Emotions and Sentience and blah, 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 blah. And a couple of hundred people signed up. I was flattered. It was nice. And the day before, I think we changed the title of the talk to "Would You Kill Your Dog for Fun?" And the enrollment doubled. And that was kind of, there was some sarcasm there, but it attracted people. So the reason I say that is one way in, I think, for some people to change their views or have them speak out is that these wolves are suffering. Okay, they're suffering psychologically, they're suffering physically. And so would you do it to your dog? If somebody came to my house when I had dogs and I lived in the foothills, said, "We need more of your type of dog in Oklahoma or some neighboring state," I would have said, no, thank you. They're doing really well here. So the idea of them being sentient, of course, is important because it means they're feeling beings. Um, I would extend it in all honesty, to say that we don't just sentient or not, we should not be intruding into the lives of these animals. So that's where sentience comes in, and that's where would you do it to your dog sort of folds into the really complicated equation.
Mhm.
True. Ian, did you have some thoughts on that topic?
Oh, no, I just couldn't agree more. Always wondered why dog owners weren't more involved than really they should be in wolf conservation. And, again, my experience has been that you see the same kind of diversity and individual personalities, uh, even pack personalities, are so unique. Maybe not to the same extent you'd see in Central Park or Stanley Park, but pretty darn close. And I don't think enough people maybe reflect on that these are such intelligent, social, sentient beings that live in these extended families and deserve a quality of life unlike what we are subjecting them to.
I think Ian just made a really important point because historically, because I'm really an evolutionary biologist in the sense I'm interested in why different patterns of behavior evolved. And years ago, I wrote some articles about looking at not only individual personalities, but if you will, the personality of a group, a pack of coyotes. Because, over the years, I mean, we had thousands of hours of observation of different individuals and different packs. But back then, there were people who really didn't believe in what's called group selection. And they got really nasty because, of course, if you're a true Darwinian, you believe in individual selection. So the reason I think what Ian just said is really important is, yeah, even the packs as a whole, sort of like the summation of the different personalities differ. I mean, and that's why I would always say, well, no, you can't talk about the dog, the beagle, the basset hound, the golden retriever, and you can't talk about the wolf or the coyote because they vary so much. The important point there is that as individuals, they may suffer differently, but it doesn't mean that they're not suffering. Because I had some person with an IQ of about one say, "Oh, so you mean that there's some wolves or coyotes or dogs who don't suffer?" And I said, "No, no, I never said that. They may suffer differently, just like the three of us on screen might suffer differently. But just because we suffer differently doesn't mean I suffer and you don't, or you suffer and I don't." So I think it's really critical there. And that feeds into the breaking up of the pack. Years ago, I asked the question at a meeting naively, and it's one of those few things I wish I hadn't asked. But I said, well, what happened to the packs in Canada from which the Yellowstone wolves were taken? It got really silent. Nobody knew. Well, what happened to the packs in Oregon and British Columbia from which the wolves who were transferred here were taken? That's part of the slippery slope of reintroduction projects. So they're suffering on both ends of, if you will, the release, the site from which they're taken and the site in which they're released. I rest.
Thanks, both. I think, kind of along those lines, I'd say both of our governments have relied on the argument that they're basing their decisions in science, right? They're killing wolves because science says killing wolves is helping caribou populations recover. Whether that's true, you have to dive into the data and tease that out. But regardless, it seems like, to say we're relying on science is almost a cop out when these are all value statements and judgments, right? Like we're making judgments based on ethics and values. And I'm curious what each of your take is on, how do you make ethical decisions more transparent and more prominent? And why does it seem like, like you said, Mark, like people consider it soft, but it's really central to everything we're doing politically. I mean, how do you shift the narrative to make it an important discussion?
I, I'm not sure, to be honest with you, because I was really upfront from 4 months into the first reintroduction that they're not following the science. Had they followed the science, they would not have interfered in the first Copper Creek pack. I mean, really simple. They would have just
Mhm.
leave them be. They didn't follow the science because, of course, they trapped the mother and the father. The father died in a trap, and I don't know if they've ever done the necropsy, which could be done overnight. And then one of the children went off on their own, and as far as we know, they may still be out there. And then they put the mother and three of her children in a cage to try to change their food habits. I was very outspoken about that. It's called food imprinting. There's no evidence that it would work in any carnivore. There's some studies on captive mice and rats where if you feed them early on particular diet, they prefer it. The joke in my family is I'm addicted to potato chips, and it turned out that my parents were also addicted to potato chips. So I was food imprinted on potato chips. But I was very outspoken saying it was the dumbest thing they could have done to take these animals, put them in a cage, feed them, and then think when they released them, they were going to go after a carcass. Because really, the carcass pits and everything, it's room service. All of the animals who the wolves go after, the domesticated farmed animals, they've lost their anti-predatory behavior. So it's room service. And wolves and other carnivores are prudent predators. It means they spend the least energy they can trying to get food. And I'm sure half of the audience here or more would do the same. Somebody wants to give me a free lunch and I would eat that food, I'll take it. But the serious part of it is that nobody paid any attention. But then CPW down here said we are following the science. And I'll be honest with you, I just gave up. I mean, it was just people said, "Oh, you got to keep saying this." Well, how many times do you have to say something? You know what I mean? Then they weren't going to follow it. And I don't know if Ian had a similar um, situation up in BC where you're pointing out where they're not following the science, and they tell you they are. It's like, what are you supposed to do?
Well, I think in particular, when the wolf call started, it was all about, leading scientists, strong scientific basis and rationale for the cull. There was going to be full transparency. It was the most humane way to kill wolves was by helicopter. They'd land the helicopter and inspect the wolves to make sure that it was humanely killed in a short amount of time. And Here we are a decade later, and they've basically bypassed everything. They don't even really talk about the science anymore because, the knee-jerk reaction from our new prime minister in Canada is just to fast track major projects in the spirit of nation building because we have to be energy independent now because of the um, uh, challenges with our southern neighbor, Mark. And
Oh,
unfortunately, what that means is that they're now bypassing all of the few protective measures that species like wolves and caribou once enjoyed. If a project now can be called nation building, they can bypass the Fisheries
yeah.
Act, the Environmental Assessment Act. They can bypass First Nations consultation. They can bypass pretty much everything, and immediately use tax dollars to subsidize oil pipelines, natural gas pipelines, mines, you name it. And that's all happened in a very, very short period of time. So even the most well-meaning, conscientious scientists and biologists that have been working on things like caribou recovery, well, they just got the rug pulled out from underneath them. There is no more guise of science anymore.
You're so correct there, and I think that that's what happened to some people I know who are really good people. I mean, this phrase, that it's humane killing or it's ethical killing is really an oxymoron. I mean, in many senses. There's collateral damage, once again, to the suffering of the animals who are left alive, for example. And some people just blow it off and saying, "Oh, you're just too soft," blah blah blah, and that's fine because they're really easy to blow off. But the transparency issue is really key. So, in the Copper Creek situation, and the reason I'm giving this story is it really laid the groundwork, the foundation for everything that happened afterwards. Um, that project, the Trap and Relocate project, began 5 days before it was transparent. And the only reason it became transparent was that Associated Press apparently, that word had come down that the Associated Press was going to release the fact that there had been this trap and release and relocate and release program. So there was no transparency there. And then we couldn't find out what happened to the animals because there was no transparency there, you know? And so really what happened was, and I mean, I'm among them, and I'm sure there's a lot of people just really lost faith in the program. You know, once again, I would listen to people with whom I would disagree. And I do believe that some of them had good intentions, but like I said, good intentions are not enough, you know. And so that was really the beginning. I actually had somebody call me the day after that program began, essentially asking me if I would support the program. And I thought they were just out of their mind, thinking I was going to support killing some animals or doing the dumb food imprinting study. So I didn't know that program had begun the day before. And of course, I said no. And 5 days later, you know, I'm sitting here and I see that it's gone public because they had to go public and become transparent. And I'm thinking, 5 days ago, somebody called me and asked me if they were going to do this program, how they could believe that I and other people would not learn that we were duped. It blows my mind. But, you know, there's a lot of people out there who blow my mind. Yeah. Yeah.
I think there's a lot of parallels between what's happening up here in Canada in terms of the wolf cull and killing wolves um, in the name of wildlife management, and then what has happened in Colorado and elsewhere where you're taking wolves from Canada or other places in the US, relocating them, basically not considering the individual as their intrinsic value, right? And their right to life. You're thinking of things as species. It's that very old school wildlife management approach, a species for a species, as opposed to the impact on the individuals, the stress on the individual, the potential death. Um, so I think it's really interesting that we have these parallels of this very kind of outdated, out of touch with the public
Mm.
position for the most part on what we feel is important, and how to, shift the balance towards thinking about individuals versus species. So I'm curious, a lot of folks on the call have been asking and wondering, like, how do we make an impact? Like, who are we supposed to be bombarding right now? How do we change, how do we impact the special interests in the government? I mean, have you guys had any influence or any experiences that would allow you to comment on, like, where can we focus our efforts other than what we're already doing?
I, I I don't know. I really mean it. I'm not a
It's a
defeatist,
tough one.
but
Yeah.
but it's a tough one because it's like, you know, my favorite definition of the word crazy, and I'm sure everybody here and everybody listening has been through it, where you do the same thing over and over again and you expect a different result. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, it's nuts to do that. So I frankly don't know. And I'm really open to it. And I talk to a lot of people, some of whom don't agree with me on, you know, strict moratorium on killing, just say. Okay. But they're nice people. We respect one another. We just happen to disagree. They actually don't have a lot of answers either because it's just like a snowball rolling downhill. I mean, it just builds momentum, you know. So, I mean, the the project ended and it's a failure. I know people get upset. You know, how do you define success? How do you define failure? Well, if we get not, in my opinion, if we take non-lethal off the table and we get over 3 to 5 years, a sustainable population, it's a success. It's not a success from the point of view of the wolves who died or were killed, but the project as a whole, you could look at as a qualified success, just say. But and it's really personal. I'm very open about it. I've just stopped writing about very much about it because it's just kind of goes off deaf ears. I mean, it's like we're following the science. No, you're not. The ranchers have a right to be compensated. They do. But what happened was the demands increased. They increased the ante. In the
Mhm.
beginning, they got everything they wanted. They asked for a finger, they got a hand, they got an arm, but nothing really was done to benefit the wolves. So it was very asymmetric.
Yeah, Ian, maybe you have thoughts on
Yeah,
this too, but
yeah.
maybe I'm curious about both of your perspectives on how public opinion has shifted too, because that to me seems like a lever
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
is much more powerful today than it has been previously.
Oh, I think that the public is our only hope. They certainly aren't our elected leaders, and certainly not in the wildlife branch. There's this bureaucracy, especially in British Columbia, that is so entrenched in trophy hunting mentality and killing one
Hmm.
species to save another. Until you clear out the bureaucracy and the civil service that has been spearheading this forever, fighting us for what, 30 years on trying to ban the grizzly bear trophy hunt. And we know from our exhaustive polling, both on the wolf cull issue, trophy hunting issues, that the vast, vast majority of British Columbians and Canadians are opposed to it. People don't
Hmm.
support killing animals for sport or gratuitous pleasure, or just because the government says that they have to do it. In terms of the recovery programs, I really sympathize with you, Mark. It must be just, devastating. I think for us in Canada, we're seeing thousands of wolves being killed on an ongoing basis, and government tax dollars going in to kill them. But we also were really scratching our heads, going, "Well, you're just randomly, cavalierly grabbing a bunch of wolves from British Columbia pretty
Hmm.
randomly without any public support or First Nation support, no consultation, and
Hmm.
just sending them on a death sentence down to Colorado and places like that." I don't know what the mortality figures are now, but it certainly wasn't very good. And I think that it really should have been the responsibility of Canada to say, we want to look at your management plans, and we want to look at your ability to actually protect those wolves before we send them down there. And of course, there was none of that done. We just said, "Oh yeah, we got lots of wolves." Well, we actually don't, because we just killed over 10,000 of them. But yeah, you can have a bunch, and then they're being systematically killed down south of the border. So it seemed like the cross-border communication on the efficacy of these management
Mm,
plans was sorely lacking.
yeah.
Yeah, you're totally right, Ian. I had people say to me, "Well, let's get the wolves from BC. At least they won't be killed up there." Well, that's hardly a good reason. No, serious. Some very educated people said that to me. They said, "What do you think?" And I said, "Well, that's nuts." And somebody up there said to me, "Well, at least we feel better because we didn't kill, say, that wolf or those wolves." But Alicia, I don't know her, just made a comment that and I hope I'm quoting you right, Alicia. It's really a generalized war on animals. It really is. Wolves are charismatic, megafauna. People like them. A lot of people who love them don't know anything about them. I'm glad they love them.
Mm,
But they've really become pawns in a political you know, f-
Yeah.
in a political, arena. I mean, for a gubernatorial candidate to say up front in the beginning, "I want to put the Wolf Project on hold." I mean, I don't know who his advisors are, but it seemed crazy to me because a lot of people I know would factor that into who they voted for. I'm cutting through the chase of a
mm,
lot of paperwork.
Oh, it's
What
it's
do you do?
sometimes I think if the wolves could have any understanding of how of the diversity of opinions that they inspire in our own species, they would just be shocked. And and how they are used, just like you say, as political pinballs on a constant basis. It's just incredible. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just incredible.
Ugh.
What it's inspiring us.
But but the one thing I will say is,
The most
oh, sorry.
beautiful and the worst.
Yeah, is but really, I know we're getting towards the end, and
Yep.
one of the questions Kristen had about maintaining hope. Well, the way I maintain, no, but I really mean, I worked with Jane Goodall really
Thanks for
closely.
bringing it there to bringing us back, Mark.
Well, no, I mean, well, no, I mean,
We need it. It's
it's just
essential.
it's easy to lose, but
Yeah.
you know, I mean, I worked really closely with Jane, up until basically the day she died. I was a really good friend. We talked a lot about these topics about hope, is that everybody can make a difference and don't give up. People will go, oh, that's a lot of fluff. That's la la, blah, blah, blah. No, no, it's not. Education. So I do a lot of work with her Roots and Shoots groups. Education, starting young, just putting it out there that certain things that we're doing, different generations on this call are just not acceptable. It's amazing how many kids would agree. And I'm inspired because I worked with a group of young kids this past spring, and when their first thing they would say after the first meeting is, when I would walk in with their teachers, they would stand up and go, "We are animal advocates." And even 8 and 10-year-olds knew it was wrong to kill the wolves in Colorado. And it was just
Yeah.
wrong. And of course, they couldn't recite philosophical theory, which is kind of boring usually, but it's just wrong. So one way I maintain hope is just keep your moral compass straight, don't give in, and just keep putting your position out there firmly from your heart. I mean, just and don't give up on your dreams. Jen used to say that all the time. Just don't give up, because they're expecting you to give up. And if we give up, the animals are screwed. I mean, it's just, yeah.
That's
Oh,
the reality. Thanks, Mark. Yeah, I mean, I think we're all here today because you and Ian are both inspiring and give us hope. I think people who just continue to speak out and to share the truth, no matter how difficult it is, no matter how uphill the battle is, we're still going to keep going. And seeing the shift in public support, seeing new
hmm.
generations come up and their values change, I think that that gives me hope. So I really appreciate the very real conversation that you brought today. We are at time. We could go on for hours on this. It's so fascinating. And I also want to acknowledge there's been a very amazing conversation in the chat. So thank you
Oh,
everyone for contributing your thoughts there. We will keep those. People had some specific questions we didn't get to, but I will work on a follow-up email with the recording and try to answer some of those questions for you all as well. We appreciate everyone being
is
here. Mark and Ian, thank you so much for your thoughts and your expertise. Again, everyone take action. If you're looking for some way to participate, this is one way right here. Whether you're in the US or Canada, you can submit your comments today and just help us with this push.
is there a way to
Yeah.
access the chat? Or have, I don't know if
Yeah, I think we're able
or,
to save it so that we can make
or
sure that we keep everyone's feedback and questions and everything. Yeah.
okay, because
So,
I would like to use some of the I would with permission, of the individuals. The comments I've been just flipping through are really important, and I can use those.
mhm.
And some of them are just so full of wisdom, but it's hard to do this and read a box that's
And
about
also
a
see
half
the
inch
chat.
by
Yeah,
a half inch.
exactly.
So if there's a way to get them and print them out, that would be great.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yep, we will
Thank you.
follow up. Yeah, thank you, everyone. We really appreciate you being here again. Thank you, Mark and Ian. And definitely reach out to us on our website if you have any questions. We'll look out for an email from us as well with follow-up. And yeah, help us protect these amazing, beautiful, important animals.
Well, thank you, Kristen, for doing this.
Of
Yeah, thank you,
course.
Kristen.
Yes, and look, also, if you guys sign up for our email updates, you'll see where we'll be announcing new webinars in the coming months. We're also going to have a International Wolf Awareness Day
Oh,
dog walk for wolves in
oh, I
person
love
here
it.
in Victoria. Yep. So,
Yeah.
but we'll also encourage folks elsewhere to do their own dog walks. So, yeah, lots of really amazing public actions coming up. So, stay tuned.
That's a great way to bring it home, Kristen.
Yeah.
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 All right, everyone. Thank you
Cool.
so
Thank
much.
you
Have a good
all.
night.
Yeah.
Okay.
Take care.
Good night. Thank you.